It's you, isn't it? Everybody's been talking about you. The other kids won't believe me.
When we think about Christopher Nolan, we will inevitably think of the Batman trilogy. But in a less mainstream way, I personally feel that out of all the current directors, he really stands out of the bunch by creating some of the most compelling and interesting movies of the past 2 decades. Christopher Nolan's films are typically extremely deep and rooted within philosophy and the fundamentals of knowledge and the nature of reality as we know it. Some of these themes include the construction of time, the malleable nature of memory, and even one's own personal identity. His work is engrossed in mathematically inspired images and concepts filled with unconventional narrative structures, practical special effects, large format film photography, and materialistic perspectives. Many of his movies have been co-written with his brother Jonathan Nolan, and he runs the company Syncopy Inc. with his wife Emma Thomas. His directorial efforts have grossed more than $5 billion worldwide and garnered 34 Oscar nominations and 10 wins. That's why it's sometimes, it's kind of difficult to remember that before directing some of the biggest scale movies in history, Nolan made his name on low-budget, ingenious films. Yet if you watch his first feature Following that was made for less than $10,000, or The Dark Knight Rises, you can clearly see similarities and traits from the same directing genius. So who is Christopher Nolan exactly? Christopher Edward Nolan was born on July 30th, 1970 in Westminster, London. His childhood was split between living between London and Illinois, and he has both British and US citizenship. Growing up, Nolan was particularly influenced by the works of Ridley Scott, Kubrick's science fiction film 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Lucas's Star Wars. After earning his bachelor's in English literature in 1993, he started working as a script reader, camera operator, and director of corporate videos and industrial films. In 1995, with a limited cast and crew, while also using the equipment that was made available to him through his society, Nolan produced a short film entitled Larceny, which led him to filming 2 more short films, including Doodlebug in 1997 about a man seemingly chasing an insect with his shoe, only to discover that it is a miniature of himself. Thanks to the success of his short films at local film festivals, he did attempt to film a self-financed feature which was scrapped. This was a period of his life where he simply couldn't get any projects off the ground. Unable to get any funding from the already limited funds available to British filmmakers, Christopher Nolan simply funded a second attempt at a feature film. The movie is called Following and became his first feature debut. This movie tells the story of a young writer who trails strangers throughout the streets of London, hoping that they will provide material for his first novel, but is drawn into a criminal underworld when he fails to keep his distance. This movie is based on Nolan's real-life experience living in London and having his apartment broken into, and the similarity between larceny and pursuing someone throughout crowded streets and going beyond the boundaries of ordinary social relations. This movie was made on a $6,000 budget, and most of the cast and crew were friends of the director. Shooting took place on weekends over the course of a year. Even though his first attempt at making a feature wasn't perfect, it was still impressive. And even before the film started doing its festival rounds, Emma Thomas, his then girlfriend and now wife, managed to sell Nolan's script Memento, that was based on a short story by his younger brother Jonathan, to New Market Films, which quickly became a hot property around Hollywood. Memento follows Leonard, who is tracking down the man who raped and murdered his wife. The difficulty in this whole investigation is that Leonard suffers from a rare and treatable form of memory loss. Although he remembers details of his wife before the accident, he cannot remember what happened 15 minutes ago, what he's doing, and why. This movie is in many ways a true successor to Following, in the same neo-noir style, even though on a budget perspective it's completely opposite. What is pretty amazing about the story structure of this film is that it is told backwards from the execution of his pal Teddy, to a beginning, ending that reveals that much of what little he knows about his existence is a lie. This movie is a much more confident and definitely much bigger looking movie than his film debut. In some ways, even though this movie was only his second feature, this might be his most complete film up to date. After making this wonderful movie, it made a lot of sense that his next movie would actually be a big budget Hollywood film. Nolan's studio debut movie was Insomnia, which is a remake of a Norwegian film by the same name. This movie is a tense, unnerving, and incredibly claustrophobic thriller with some of the best acting in any of Nolan's movies. Insomnia has Robin Williams playing a villain, deviating from the comedic roles for which he is known for. In a small Alaskan town, a veteran police detective is sent to investigate the murder of a teenage girl who is forced into a psychological game of cat and mouse by the primary suspect, who blackmails him into helping frame the victim's boyfriend for his own murder. Even though this movie is perfect from a technical aspect, it feels different than his other work, and this could also come from the fact that the script was not written by himself. Even so, the story has a wonderfully creepy atmosphere. Out of all the Hollywood remakes of foreign films, this is one of the strongest entries, with a powerhouse cast and an accurate depiction of mental and moral fragility in a visceral and effective way. This highly polished film was a strong step up for Nolan, and one that would lead to Warner giving him one of the biggest movie franchises, Batman, which would cement him into cinematic history. The Batman franchise has had in the past a somewhat checkered history over the decades, with the cheesy 60s TV series or Tim Burton's gothic take on the metropolis of Gotham City. Even though some interesting takes have happened over the years, when Nolan came on board to direct the new Batman movie, we can arguably say that the franchise was almost at its lowest level after the atrocious Batman Forever and the even worse Batman and Robin. 8 years after Batman's worst movie to date had come, Nolan made Batman Begins and finally gave fans of the franchise a Batman film that they had been waiting for. The movie was mature and intelligent and had enough of a gritty take on the origins of Bruce Wayne and Gotham City. In this origin story movie, young Bruce Wayne travels to the Far East where he is trained in the martial arts by Henry Ducard, a member of the mysterious League of Shadows. After discovering that the League's true purpose is to completely destroy Gotham City, Bruce Wayne returns to Gotham with an intent on cleaning up the city without resorting to murder. With the help of his loyal butler and Lucius Fox, a tax expert at Wayne Enterprises, Batman is born. For this interpretation of the film, Nolan got rid of the cartoonish look in favor of a more grounded reality. Featuring little CGI, Nolan really took the story and mythology of the Gotham universe and turned it inside out. This was a real departure of what a blockbuster consisted of at the time, with bloated VFX and in some ways the equivalent of empty vessels. Chirstopher Nolan was undoubtedly able to breathe fresh air into the franchise and really cemented Nolan's reputation as one of the greatest directors working in modern Hollywood. Following such a big box office success, Nolan was able to persuade studios to make a passion project that he had wanted to make for a while. This movie is based on a novel by sci-fi author Christopher Priest and follows the story of two magicians, Alfred Bord and Robert Anger, who became embroiled in a years-long feud after Anger's wife drowns in an accident that he holds Borden responsible for. They move on and eventually both become famous for a trick which sees them vanish across the room into thin air, but each also holds a terrible secret that will have terrible consequences. This movie is very hard to pigeonhole in regards to a genre, and shows a compelling take of obsession and compulsion. Many people complained that this movie was hard to follow with its puzzle-like structure and actually pretty difficult to like due to the fact that the two protagonists have such bitter murderous intent. But in its own right, it still shows a genius within Nolan's direction, and even though it didn't do as well, it kinda makes me hope that one day he will be willing to re-explore the dark emotional themes portrayed in this movie. with that being said, this concludes the first part in my two-part retrospective on Chirstopher Nolan. In the next video I will focus on the second half of his directing videography ending in 2020. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. If you so feel inclined to let me know what your favorite Nolan film is, please do so in the comments. I always love hearing from you guys. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.